Your reaction first and foremost, with the jobs number, with actually a tick higher in participation, a steadying perhaps in terms of wage inflation. What do you make of the numbers?
I think these numbers were relatively close to what we expected. I doubt anyone's going to change their view radically on this. I think the increases in participation are good news, but I think there's a tendency to exaggerate how much higher participation will reduce inflation, because people think of it as extra labor supply, but they forget that if the unemployment rate stays the same and participation goes up, more people are working, earning, and therefore spending, and that in turn raises the demand for labor. So I think this is a positive development for the economy, more people working, more GDP, but people have a tendency to exaggerate how much favorable participation contributes to necessary disinflation.
Doesn't the Fed, Larry, have to push people out of jobs? I mean, right now, everyone is earning money and able to pay up as much as they need to for goods and services, but in order to bring inflation down, they're going to need unemployment at 4.5%, 5.5%. I don't know what NAIRU is right now, but maybe you have a view. Is that going to bring a political backlash?
Matt, my guess is that things are much less good than the Fed has supposed. My estimate would be that the NAIRU is now near 5%. I don't see how you can fail to think that the NAIRU has risen substantially when you look at how much there's been an increase in vacancies at a given unemployment rate, what economists call the beverage curve. When you look at the big increases in quit rates that we've seen, when you look at wage behavior, and I add all that up, and I see a difficult situation where I think that to start bringing down inflation, we're going to need to get above the NAIRU. That's probably somewhere in the 5% range, and I think we do have to achieve some meaningful amount of disinflation. So I've said that I'd be surprised if we get to the 6%, get to the 2% inflation target without an unemployment rate that approaches or exceeds 6%. And I've said it before, I think the Fed's most recent judgment that they're going to get back to target with an unemployment rate that stays at 4.1% is certainly a possible outcome, but how that could be regarded as a most probable outcome, I can't really understand. I think that's the quite optimistic case, nothing like the most reasonable case. And I think that the preponderant probability is that the combination of 4% unemployment and 2% inflation, a misery index 4 plus 2 of 6, that the Fed foresees will be a substantial underestimate of where we'll be 1 year and 2 years from now.
And to that end, therefore, Larry, when you looked at the JOLTS data, because it hasn't just been, of course, the non-farm payrolls, there's been a sprinkling of other data, whether we look at the new numbers coming from ADP, of course, whether it's the jobless claims that looked hot, you felt that really a soft landing was very hard to achieve. To that point, the market now thinking potentially a soft landing is achievable, you still think, no, not necessarily here?
I don't think that we've seen a soft landing means disinflation with a strong economy. Evidence that we're having a strong economy without substantial disinflation doesn't really speak to the likelihood of a soft landing. So my view that a soft landing represents the triumph of hope over experience is not one that I'm changing yet. It certainly could happen, but I think that one has to think in terms of preponderant probabilities, and that's not the preponderant probability.
Larry, I want to bring up the passing of Mikhail Gorbachev. You served on the Council of Economic Advisors in Ronald Reagan's White House when those two made history together and really changed the trajectory of globalization, right? The fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Soviet Union really brought the world closer together. Now Vladimir Putin is taking it in the other direction as Gorbachev dies. What are your thoughts on the situation with Russia as it stands plans and the legacy of Mikhail Gorbachev?
I think in a quite extraordinary way, Mikhail Gorbachev will be remembered as a great historic figure for presiding over a great historic surrender and letting that process play out without massive loss of life. And I think that is in its way not the achievement he set out to achieve, but is in its way a very substantial achievement. Look, I think we're at a time when globalization is getting a bad name. If you ask what the era of globalization has meant in terms of the quality of life for people around the world, in terms of the halving of the share of children on our planet who die before the age of 5, the doubling of the fraction of kids who learn to read, the fact that for all our problems, the incidence of violent conflict on our planet is much lower than it was in the 1970s or 1980s. The extraordinary change in human potential represented by the fact that there are now more smartphones on Earth than there are adults, and so the majority of the world's people can reach out to all of the world's other people. I think these are fantastic things. And yes, this is under attack. It is under attack from Russia. It is under attack in important respects from an axis of authoritarians connecting Russia and China and Iran. And it is going to be the great struggle of our time to maintain the rule of law, to maintain openness, to maintain a world of opportunity for as many people as possible.
Yeah.
But I think it's very much the wrong way to pursue a strategy of resisting international connection rather than a strategy of better managing international connection. I think there's nothing in history to suggest that a world of nations that isolate themselves is going to be an ultimately peaceful or prosperous or very attractive world.
Larry, talk to us, therefore. You mentioned China. And of course, we got news this week. The Communist Party will hold its 20th National Congress starting on October the 16th. China actually facing economically a rather different slate than the US. Certainly the inflation, not their first and foremost priority, but a property crisis and a COVID crisis. What is your outlook on China as an economic growth fueling the rest of the world at the moment?
Look, always a mistake to count China out after its remarkable performance over the last 40 years. They've shown themselves to be resilient and able to overcome problems. But the problems look pretty deep, profound, and severe this time. I have learned over time to watch what happens to capital flows. And when a country's wealthy citizens are trying to take their money out, that's a time to be nervous about the near-term economic prospects for a country. And that certainly is the case in terms of what people are trying to do in China today. The date at which China will put COVID behind it seems to be a receding horizon. So I'd have to say that I view the situation in China with considerable anxiety.